Good morning. Welcome to the Saline County COVID-19 update for January 19th, 2021. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of where we are currently nationally. One thing I do want to point out here, if you remember in the last 2 or 3 updates where I've mentioned that the 2-week average of cases and deaths have kind of been taking a slow downward movement. This last 2 weeks, we've started to see upward movement in those national case numbers and deaths again. Next slide. Also seeing the same thing at the state level with cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. We're seeing that kind of steady over the last 2 or 3 reporting periods where it's going down a little bit, and now we're starting to see this kind of upward creep in this last 2 weeks. Next slide. These are our totals as of yesterday. The one thing I really want to kind of point out, though, is, and I'll show it a little bit better in the next couple slides, is that when you look at the hospitalizations, our case numbers and deaths for these first 18 days of January, we are actually looking better than where we were at this same time last month in December for the first 18 days. And that'll be a little more evident on the next slide, please. So as of yesterday, we've seen about 721 cases of COVID in the county. But that is, though, about 450 less than where we were at this time last month. Next slide. Same thing with deaths, 16 in January, but we are still lower than where we were at this time in December. Now, I want to just kind of be cautiously optimistic about these, that yes, things are starting to look a little bit better. You know, is that for this reporting period? Is the trend going to stay that way? You know, there's the variants that you've probably heard about that are being talked about, and we really don't know how that's going to impact us a little bit later. So people still need to stay vigilant about their actions. Next slide. Just a couple additional clusters in the last couple of weeks. Not to be not unexpected, considering just kind of how the widespread nature of this is. Next slide. Testing updates. Well Health is still having it at Church of the Cross. There are a couple of other ones coming up that I didn't have all the information for when I updated these last night, but they will be on these slides when we send them out later. Saline Family Healthcare is having a testing event on January 23rd from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Salvation Army. Excuse me. And Saline Regional will have one on the 24th at ComCare from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Both of these events are for anybody to be tested at. And then if you look at their specific websites, they'll have the information on those testing events. Next slide. So again, this is kind of what most people are wanting to know more about. So I thought this week I would kind of hit on a few things that we do know and kind of what we don't know situation. So we have set up, in conjunction with Saline Family and Saline Regional, a joint operation of a semi-permanent vaccine site at the old JCPenney in the Central Mall. Our current focus is continuing to finish those phase 1 healthcare workers, which we'll be doing over this week and next week. And then at some point advancing to phase 2 once the governor pretty much tells the counties that they can do so. What we don't know in relation to that is specifically when phase 2 will start. We're working on some planning stuff amongst our vaccine planning partners to be able to help clarify what categories, you know, what groups are going to be in that phase 2, what the priority is going to be, and trying to get that information together. but we also don't know is when our next vaccine shipments will arrive. We might get 24, 48 hours notice before they do, so there's a little bit of planning there that has to take place very quickly when they show up, which then probably leads into the next week for actually getting them out. And then we also don't know how many doses will arrive. We don't have predictability on either one of those two things at this point. As we get more information, though, we are trying to push it out in those Tuesday and Thursday vaccine updates, and the sign-up link is there at the bottom of the slide. Next slide. So just as a reminder, these are the 5 phases that Kansas is using, and they have added the kind of the projected potentially kind of timeframes for getting through those phases. Just keep in mind that they're based on what the state says as far as when the state will move from phase 1 to phase 2, also on availability of vaccine and completion of the prior phase. And so just depending on how vaccine comes to us, how much comes to us, will all kind of feed into how long it takes us to get through and complete a phase on the graph here. Next slide. So just as a reminder, there are different campaigns going on. There is also the hashtag Mask On Economy Strong with the Saline Chamber of Commerce, and we'll Eric from the Chamber and myself will be on KINA this Saturday to talk about COVID and the economy here specifically in the local area at 9 o'clock. So make sure you tune in for that. Next slide. And then just continue the mask order, continue following all of the recommendations, social distancing, hand washing. The health order will expire at the end of this week, and don't anticipate at this point extending the order. And then we'll just have to watch carefully how things progress as we move through, trying to get people vaccinated, watching for if and when these new variants happen to show up in Kansas, and then how that impacts the spread in different areas. So with that, that ends my prepared presentation, and then if you have any questions.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I've got a question. You kind of briefly went over the sign-up website. Is that live now, or is that going to be?
The sign-up,
I think it was on the previous screen.
For the, so right now the sign-up website I had on
vaccinations.
There, get the updates. That is live for those Tuesday and Thursday vaccine updates. Is that the one you're referring to?
Oh, I thought, I apologize. I thought it was a sign up for getting your vaccine.
No, that will come a little bit later on once we get ready to launch phase 2, because we already have scheduling all of the phase 1 healthcare workers still. So there'll be more of a public facing scheduling site that will come out a little bit later on.
My second question is, I have been getting calls about stage 2 or phase 2, where it says critical workers. I think there's a lot of people that think that they're critical workers. Who decides that? Is that the state that decides that? Is that the county that decides that?
It's the county, and I'm working with my planning partners for the vaccine rollout here, which is Salina Family and Salina Regional, as we look through some of the guidance documents that were provided, but it doesn't clearly say that these are the phase 2 critical workers. So we're working on developing what that entails, what that means, so that we can get all of that information out to the public probably in the next couple of weeks, because a lot of our time right now has been spent on getting the site up, figuring out the logistics, and then the phase 1 healthcare schedule to finish them.
Thank you.
And Jason, this is Commissioner Sparks. Can you, what is it that's ending in the end of the week? Hit on that a little bit more.
Oh, you talking about the 2 testing events?
No, something about a health order that ends.
Oh, the mass gathering limit, that health order expires on the 24th at midnight, I believe it is.
So does that mean that everybody can go back to larger groups and all of that if they want?
Right, so some of the limits that it imposed, like the 15 people, there are still some limits for events depending on whether it's a sporting event because of CASA, and there's school limits and things like that. But right now, I just don't see with the current numbers, and of course we'll keep watching, a significant reason to continue that for another 15 days.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
Commissioner Weiss here. Jason, if the mandate is allowed to expire, does that also include the mask mandate?
No, the health order for the mass gathering and the mask mandate are 2 separate orders. So that one's, the mask one is still in place regardless.
And is the one about the order for the, bars and restaurants to be closed at midnight, is that a separate one than that order there that ends this Friday also?
That was all part of the health order that will expire this weekend.
Okay, so when that expires, they can go back to staying open till 2 o'clock?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to
need a consensus. Do we need a consensus on this from the commissioners? Okay, all right, Jason, well, thank you. Is there any other thing?
Well, this is Commissioner Vidrickson.
Yes.
And I have, so that would take place this weekend. And, you know, we're so far from being out of this, I'm questioning why we would relax our guidelines at this point.
Jason, do you want to comment on that?
Well, we've seen the decrease. Part of our original intent with the health order was to get through the holidays and to get through, we extended it after Christmas to, because of that potential holiday surge, which thankfully we didn't see here. Now, I'm certainly open to, if there is still support to keep it in place, but just right now, I just don't see looking at the numbers, a huge impact to try and continue to support keeping it.
Well, my feeling is that, I mean, we're averaging somewhere between 75 and 100 cases a day, it seems like, or somewhere in that neighborhood, 50 to 80 cases anyway. I'm just doesn't seem to me like we should be opening it back up.
Well, and we've still got 6 days until it expires, so.
But we don't have another meeting until then either.
Well, that would only be if you decided that you wanted to not let it, or excuse me. So within the 6 days, if it decided to extend it, you would only need another meeting if you decided that you wanted to not extend it. Or you wanted to change the order or anything else.
So what you're saying is right now, until we have our next meeting, this order will stay into effect until we decide next Tuesday or to change it.
No.
Okay.
This meeting as a public health order, or this order as a public health order,
Okay.
would, if after on the 24th, if it decide to extend it, it would extend. If you decided that for some reason you didn't want to extend it or that you wanted to amend it, to change it, then we would need a meeting of the commissioners to amend, change, or revoke that order.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay. Thank you, Jason.